Welcome to Time to Press Pause, real life stories from the C-suite. I'm your host, Ellen Williams, CEO of The Salient Strategist, and today I'm speaking with Kevin Bartram. We're exploring his press pause story that was prompted from the events of 9/11 and how the time he took to think things through in those days that followed those tragic events changed his life forever. Kevin Bartram is founder and principal of Bartram Partnerships. For more than 30 years, he has been creating cutting-edge strategies that power economic growth and inspire social responsibility through high-impact, cost-effective, integrated marketing and partnership programs. Through Bartram Partnerships, Kevin drives action that addresses one of the most vital issues of our time, climate change and its societal impacts. He has driven green action through sustainable brand partnerships with and for the San Francisco Giants, Sonoma Raceway, Mill Village Film Festival, Outside Lands Music Festival, CA Academy of Sciences, and the Exploratorium. He crafts sustainability messages for green product development through work with organizations and sponsored properties that are active or seeking to be better positioned in the environmental space. Kevin also works with innovative brands such as Impossible Foods, for which he developed a revolutionary sponsorship, becoming the official burger of the Seattle Kraken hockey team and Climate Pledge Arena. Welcome, Kevin. It's great to have you here on Time to Press Pause.
Thanks, Ellen. Thanks for having me. Really happy and honored to be able to join you today.
Awesome. So, Kevin, you and I met several years ago at an event called Green Biz, and it was right after COVID, and it was the first event that I had gone back to. And one thing I remember was everyone was so friendly, and I wasn't sure if it was because the topic was sustainability or everybody had been in their house for a year and a half and they just was so excited to be out somewhere and talking to other people.
Yeah, I think it was a combination of the two. It is sustainability tends to be a pretty friendly social group. You know, people are really pulled together for what I think are all the right reasons. But at the same time, it was just a surreal period. It was the first really big event that a lot of people, including myself, came back to. So great event. And there was a lot of real meaningful connection there.
There was. I was very happy to be there. And I had the pleasure of meeting you. And we have since connected a few times. And on a different topic, pressing pause, I'm really interested to hear your story.
Thank you. I'm like I said, I'm really happy and honored to be able to share that. I've been listening to your previous podcasts and great stories, and wonderful to be in the company of all those very cool people that have shared their stories here.
Thank you so much.
Just to kind of give it a little context, I go back to, I grew up in a broken home, and I had to go to work when I was very young and started working when I was like 13. And I was an achiever in school, and it was always a priority that we get good grades and be able to go to college, get scholarships and all of that. That was very necessary. And so really, committed hard to working as a kid, as a teenager. Out of college in my 20s, had to make money to have fun in the 80s, and wasn't really thinking a lot about long term at the time. It was more kind of living for tomorrow. And I had a real philosophy at that time that I was going to have fun and worry about things when I needed to, which led to my first real pause and pivot point when I was in my late 20s, when my wife and I got together. It was time to go out and look at having a house. And when I realized what it was going to take, decided I'd better get in a career track that I feel good about. So I made a significant shift at that time and paused. And again, this is now my late 20s, changed careers, and through a series of events, wound up in this interesting space of sports marketing and sponsorship. In the early 90s, moved to the Bay Area to start a career in sponsorship. Sort of found a natural place that I could provide consistent value to organizations and clients. And that was in developing sponsorship relationships between big brands and various types of organizations, and kind of working either side. At times I worked on the corporate side, and at times I work on the organizational side. This was now early 90s. It was just before the tech boom. Started an agency with a partner, a guy from Toronto who was down in the Bay Area looking to launch an agency. We went out, started a firm, and within a very short time, we got a client, Pacific Bell, the old telephone company here, that hired us to develop sponsorships and raise their brand awareness and connect them at a higher level. And that led us to doing a naming rights deal with the San Francisco Giants, which is what got Pacific Bell Park started. The importance of that was, well, besides the fact that I was a huge Giants fan, and just 2 years earlier was writing letters to all the owners and the commissioner to ask them not to let the Giants move to Toronto, where they were talking about, or Tampa Bay, I think at the time. And so all of a sudden, I was in this room with Giants leadership helping develop this naming deal that ultimately really got the new ballpark going, the project going, and led to all of the other funding that came. But what it did for our agency, it really put us on the map and put us on this kind of rocket ship that throughout the rest of the decade we rode. And we were really the leaders in what was then a boutique practice, was sort of a niche practice in marketing, in corporate sponsorship, program development, naming rights, cause marketing. I was married, but didn't have. Throughout that work, the drive for me was to do meaningful work, to create programs and partnerships that drove meaningful change or economic development in the community. And as these things go, you build a company and you find yourself having to keep the company going. So you take work that maybe doesn't really feed the soul, but feeds the bottom line. We're able to do some big, meaningful things, but at the same time, also had contracts with big companies where we were really just looking to help move cases of beverages and get more people signed up to get credit cards and those sorts of things. So I started to phase out of my leadership role with that agency and focused all of my effort on one big client that was tech oriented, that really wound up beating to the pivot point that created my really significant pause. This was a client that was just getting started with what's now considered the Internet of Things. It's an organization called the Internet Home Alliance. What was important there is that September 9th, 2001, I wound up in a small town of Vermont, Woodstock, Vermont, on a shoot with Bob Vila, who was then working closely with Sears Roebuck, which was a member of the Internet Home Alliance, shooting TV programming. We were wiring a farmhouse in Vermont with the latest in technology. Very surreal. Kathy Ireland, the model, had a carpet company, and she was there as well. So the evening of September 10th, had a dinner with Bob Vila and Kathy Ireland and my clients, and just kind of another day at the office. One of these unique experiences I found myself in. September 11th rolls around, 2001, went out to the farmhouse to work on the shoot and coordinate my clients, who were all the corporate members of this organization. And we watched on these new big screen TVs that had just been installed by Panasonic, the planes crash into the towers. Well, obviously, everybody was very affected and full run of emotions. But I found myself on a call with my wife, or a year and a half or so prior. I had my first child. I had a daughter. The immediate emotional draw to get home and be there with my wife and daughter in this moment that felt like we didn't know. It felt like it could be the beginning of World War III. All of a sudden, airports were closed. You couldn't fly. You thought about just getting in a car and driving cross country, whatever could be done. It was panic inducing. But at the end of the day, I decided to not try to do anything drastic. And I stayed in Woodstock for 3 days and walked around while the world we all just sort of spun around from this thing, and really thought about what I was doing. What was I really doing with my life? What was I doing flying around the country to all these different locations to meet with corporate people and help them bump the needle a little bit on this big undertaking to develop what was then called the internet or digital lifestyle? I decided really at that time I needed to make a change. Was able to get out of Woodstock late that week, get a flight back by way of Detroit, and kind of a convoluted process as a lot of people had to be able to travel. Got back home and told my wife going to need to start to look to shift. A couple months later, I was at a big meeting at General Motors headquarters in Detroit with all the clients again, and schmoozing and doing your thing and just feeling empty really from the work and feeling the draw of what was going on in the world and the needs that seemed to exist out there that I felt I was better suited to address. And just decided, I called my wife from that meeting and said, I'm going to step back from this. I'm going to walk. And it was at the time good money, but decided it was really time to make that change. The real pull in all of that was this deep feeling that there was something more important that I should be doing with my time and my skill. I wanted to be part of my daughter's life, needed to make that change, and was very clear in the direction I needed to go, rip off the Band-Aid and hang my own shingle and start over.
Wow. We've got a lot to unpack there, starting with when you were 13, all the way up to being a father. But certainly, I want to address September 11th, 2001 affected all of us. There was that ripple effect of what am I doing? What does it mean when something like this can happen and be so disruptive and so devastating at the same time? So I remember my kids were in school and we jumped in the car and drove to the school, and we were the only one that did that. And I remember saying, we don't need to be here. They're okay. They're in school.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But there definitely was those next few days of what's going to happen next. So I totally understand how that really made you take pause. And I think many of the listeners will definitely connect with that date. You did say that the work, it doesn't feed the soul, but it feeds the bottom line. And that's an important distinction, but also something that a lot of the people I've interviewed have found it does take a bit to move from feeding the bottom line to feeding your soul.
Yes, it does. And I realize too that there is a certain luxury in being able to do this that comes from that career financial success. That had I not had that, I would not have been in a position to. I had now bought my house. I had now settled into a place where I could take a risk.
Absolutely. Can you tell us what, if you can recall, what your thoughts were when you made that step and then what the results were for you going out on your own?
Initially, I had no clients and I had to start from scratch, start everything over. And I went back to basically what I had done 10 years before when I first broke into the industry and went to people organizations that seemed like they might be able to use help in sponsorship, created crude sales materials myself and started reaching out. I worked out of my home. I had a home office well before that was a thing. I remember my first client getting back out there was a group of people who were working here from India who were producing an IMAX film about India to promote the country and the culture. And I knew nothing about any of it, but I learned and I was representing them. And then one thing led to another. And I did have some demand for what I did. And I wound up, it wasn't long before I started getting calls and getting back into client work. I wound up partnering with somebody with whom we were trying to merge deeper social consciousness with corporate activity. And we created a company called Social Alliance Marketing and worked with organizations in the consciousness space like the Esalen Institute and the Institute of Noetic Sciences and folks like that. And then it wasn't long before I started getting pulled back into more commercial endeavors, albeit ones that had cause ties. I was able to reposition myself as an active leader in the kind of cause-oriented sponsorship space and was able to build and sustain an active business going on now 20 years. Have been able to feed the soul while generating revenue. It's not always easy. And in fact, of late, it's gotten a little harder again. Post-COVID, the COVID world has changed things quite a bit. I'm actually now going through another pivot. I'd love to say it's a pause, but I don't feel any ability to actually pause as much as just pivot. So rather than just doing the work myself, doing more teaching and training and coaching through the process of building successful sponsorship offerings and going out to market and getting sponsors to fund meaningful organizations.
I love to hear that. I definitely have had my toe in the water of sustainability. Not my whole career is in sustainability, but it's definitely a thread within a lot that I do, which is, of course, how we met. One last question
Yes.
here.
Yes.
What advice would you have for other leaders as when they might identify it's time to press pause?
What I would say is to listen to that small voice that you hear, to give yourself space to be able to really listen and feel things internally, to follow your intuition and at the same time be logical and do your research and understand what your shift might mean to those around you and to your long-term success and happiness. To really listen. If you need to take a small break to get some clarity and to talk to other people who have made changes and what they've run into. And the more I talk to entrepreneurs and people who are I'm currently with the shift I'm making now, I'm talking to a lot of peers and folks who are working for themselves and have encountered their own challenges. And I find that everybody needs to take if not a longer pause, a brief pause at some point to check things and make adjustments. But the importance of really following your intuition, my shift allowed me over these past 20 years to get so involved in both my kids' lives and helping to raise them, and lots of youth baseball coaching and high school fundraising and things that I would not have been able to do had I stayed on that track. And listening to that voice at the time and having the space back in 2001 to really feel it and hear it made a huge difference.
I really like that advice of listen to your inner self or your inner voice and learn from speaking with other people. I think that's a great way to identify a pause and then also to give yourself information to ponder during that pause to see what the next step for you might be. So,
yes.
Great advice. Thank you so much, Kevin, for being here with me today. It was really a great pleasure to reconnect with you and was a terrific story.
Thank you very much. Thanks for listening and for having me here and for allowing me to share. And thanks for all you're doing. I think the content that you're bringing forward carries a big impact. It's going to change lives. So thanks for that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to this episode of Time to Press Pause. If you'd like to learn more about Kevin, visit bartrampartnerships.com. If you'd like to learn more about me, visit thesalientstrategist.com. And please listen again wherever you listen to your podcasts.